Good evening, my dear friends. I hope you're all doing very well. Tonight we're going to be learning Chapter 7 of the Laws of Shabbat. In this chapter, the Rambam is going to be discussing the 39 forbidden labors that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat. So, let us begin. The Rambam begins off by telling us that in general, when we speak in regards to the laws of Shabbat, that there are certain things that we're not allowed to do, and if a person does them purposely, so then if there is, all the numbers add up, so to speak, if there are witnesses and he was warned and so on and so forth, and he was brought to the high court, so then it would end up in the person being killed, God forbid. Or if it was a case where the person did it by mistake, so then they would have to bring a sacrifice for forgiveness. So then these are 39 primary laws, and then we have also those that are derived from these, as we're going to see once we learn them. So the 39 primary categories of forbidden labor on Shabbat are 40 minus 1, he says. 39. And these are as follows. Number 1, plowing, sowing, reaping, collecting sheaves, threshing, winnowing, separating, grinding, sifting, kneading, baking, shearing, whitening, beating, dyeing, spinning, making heddles, in regards to when a person is weaving or sewing, mounting the warp, also in regards to the weaves, the actual weaving, that was number 19, undoing woven fabric, tying, untying, sewing, tearing, building, demolishing, beating with a hammer, we'll see later what that means, trapping an animal, slaughtering the animal, or skinning the animal, processing hides, removing hair, cutting leather, writing, erasing, ruling lines, kindling a flame, extinguishing the flame, transferring from one domain to another. And that was the last one. So these are 39 primary labors that the Torah tells us we're not allowed to do on Shabbat. Now, these are called the primary categories of labor. What do you mean by the primary? Because there are also other things that are analogous. I think that's the word that they use over here. Analogous activity, which are part of this, even though they, in other words, there is a title, and then we have the details of what they are. So, for instance, plowing or digging or making a groove in the ground are all actually the same thing, because each one of these involves digging in the ground, and they all reflect a single activity. Similarly, same concept, also a person is not allowed to sow seeds in the ground, and also not allowed to plant trees, or extend trees, or prunes trees. So all of these are all part of, a single primary category of things that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat, because they all have a single intent to cause a plant to grow. So these will all be part of the same category. It's just one of the 39. And that's how it is in every one of these 39. So although we say it's 39, there are actually many details. Now, but when we're talking about the details, and this is what he's about to tell us right now, there are things, so there are the main things that are the actual labor that we're not allowed to do. For instance, in this case of what we were speaking about, whether it is to actually plow a field, or to make a groove in the ground, or to dig a hole, it's all part of the same main concept of that labor in that situation. But then we also have a derivative of the labor. So in other words, it's not the actual labor itself, but rather it's a derivative of it. Meaning, what does this mean? It says that we're not allowed to grind on Shabbat. So what about if a person takes, he's cutting a salad, let's say, and we cut that salad very, very, very small. It's like, the Israeli salads that they give you. So they take the cucumbers and tomatoes and they chop them up really, really, really small. So if you make them so small that it resembles grinding, that's a problem on Shabbat. Even though it's not actually ground, because, you just cut up the pieces. But still, since it resembles the grinding, so then we would not be allowed to do that. Or is another option of somewhere where we could have a similar concept of grinding. If a person takes a strip of metal and he pulverizes it to use the powder. In other words, he really sands it down so well until it literally turns into powder. That's the same concept of grinding. So that's something which we're not allowed to do on Shabbat. Making cheese. So we have, different, separate pieces. It's milk or, it's like cottage. And now what happens is it becomes into actual cheese. So now what have you done? You have actually collected separate entities and you have bound them together and you have created a new block. And that is the idea of building. Building is you take many materials and you collect them and you bind them together and essentially you build something. So we're not allowed to make cheese on Shabbat for that reason. Because it's like building. It's not actually building because building is something which is entirely different. But since it has the same attribute as building, so therefore we're not allowed to do that. So we will have many derivatives that are not the actual forbidden labor in its own right, but since it has the same common denominator, so therefore you would not be allowed to do that, and you will know according to what its main aspect of the action which is performed, you will know under what category it belongs. So in whatever case a person does one of these actions on Shabbat, so if it's purposely or imperpusely, so then in whatever case, then it would have its consequence of what happens when a person would do that on Shabbat. And this would apply to the primary rules and also to the derivatives in the same way, almost. What's the difference between the primary and the derivatives? In regards to the way we have to keep them, they're exactly the same. In the way it comes out, if a person does it by mistake, so if a person does a primary, different primaries, so then they would have to bring a sacrifice for each action that they did. So if a person, purposely plowed and sows and reaps on Shabbat, these are three different things. So he would have to bring a sacrifice for each one of these three things, a separate one. But if a person does these derivatives, and they're all, let's say he does a few things, which are the derivatives of one primary, for instance, as we said before, in regards to grinding, to grind the salad too small, to cut it up, and also to have this pulverizing the metal. So since these are both the outcomes, the derivatives of one primary, so then the person would only have to bring one sacrifice because they go back to one source. Hope that was explained properly. And that is the concept of the 39 items, but it's more than just one item because there are many items within each one of these primaries. So you have a primary, let's say number 1, you're not allowed to plow on Shabbat, so that would include many details within it. Number 2, the second thing that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat, which is to sow. We're not allowed to sow a field. So that would include also its details within it. And so on and so forth. We have the primary and the outcome, the derivatives, which are all part of that same concept. So that is the chapter of today. So in other words, this chapter of today, the Rambam is introducing us to the concept of the 39 labors that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat. And now we understand what they are, so whenever we refer to these later on, we will know what we're talking about. And over the next chapters, the Rambam is going to go into detail to explain each one of these, what they are, what exactly is it that we're not allowed to do, so on and so forth. So I hope you're keeping up with this. The laws of Shabbat are not very easy laws, but we're going to be slowly going through them, and God willing, having a much better understanding of Shabbat. And we did already 7 chapters out of 30, so that means we've done a very nice chunk already. So we're making progress. We'll see you all tomorrow. Have a very good one in the meantime.